Hi, I'm Tiffany from OC Habitats, and today we're going to learn about the elegant tern and some issues this coastal bird has faced recently. The elegant tern belongs to a group of species of water birds called the terns. These are a part of the family Laridae and the subfamily Sternidae. Terns are related to gulls but are more slender, with shorter legs and longer wings. Most terns are black and white, with their bills ranging in color from black, red, or yellow. There are more than 40 species of tern, with 12 of them being commonly seen in North America. The largest tern species is the Caspian tern, while the smallest is a least tern. Some additional species are seen in North America when they visit from Europe and Asia, or when they're blown in from the ocean on the east coast. The elegant tern, also known by its scientific name Thalasseus elegans, is a medium-sized tern with a long, drooping orange bill. In flight, you can see its dark primary feathers. During the non-breeding season, adults have a white forehead and a shaggy black crest along the back of the head, and during the breeding season, adults develop a black cap. Juvenile elegant terns look similar to non-breeding adults, but they can be distinguished by their more yellow bill and dark mottling on the back and wings that can be seen in flight. In terms of behavior, the elegant tern is both highly social and vocal, with a harsh call that is similar to that of other terns. The royal tern can be found in some of the same areas as the elegant tern, and the two species look very similar. You can tell them apart by the elegant tern's slightly smaller yet relatively large head and by its shorter tail. In addition, the elegant tern's bill is longer and thinner than that of the royal tern, and the black crown of non-breeding plumage is more extensive than the royal tern's. During the non-breeding months from July to March, elegant terns will roost on beaches, mudflats, rocks, and artificial structures all along the west coast of the Americas, stretching from Washington state to mid-South America. In these areas, they forage on open waters and estuaries. Preferring to stay by the coast, the elegant tern rarely visits inland freshwater areas like some other tern species do. Now let's test what you learned about the elegant tern. How can you tell elegant terns apart from royal terns? Is it A, elegant terns have relatively smaller heads compared to body size than royal terns? B, elegant terns have black heads while royal terns have white foreheads and shaggy black crests? Or C, elegant terns have longer and thinner beaks than royal terns do? If you answered C, you are correct. Elegant terns have longer and thinner beaks than royal terns do. Their heads are also relatively larger than royal terns, and both elegant terns and royal terns can have either black or white heads, depending on the time of year. Elegant terns eat primarily small, schooling fish like the northern anchovy, which they catch by plunge diving into the water. They eat some other species of fish as well, including the Pacific sardine, Pacific mackerel, grunion, goby, and cusk eel. They typically hunt independently and will fly up to 15 miles to find fish. However, they will also gather in large groups if the fish are concentrated enough in one area. Anchovy population levels have a direct influence on the elegant tern's breeding success, since they make up such a large portion of the elegant tern's diet. A limiting factor to the northern anchovy's population is El Niño, the warm phase of a climate phenomenon called El Niño Southern Oscillation. El Niño causes a warming in the ocean surface in the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean. Anchovies feed primarily on zooplankton, which thrive in cold, nutrient-rich water brought up from the deep ocean through wind patterns. However, during El Niño, changing weather patterns lead to less wind over the Pacific Ocean. This leaves less nutrients available for zooplankton, less food for anchovies, and less food for the elegant terns. This weather phenomenon ultimately results in a not-so-successful breeding season for the elegant tern. Let's see what you learned about the elegant tern's diet. What fish makes up the most of the elegant tern's prey? Is it A, grunion, B, northern anchovy, or C, Pacific sardine? If you answered B, northern anchovy, you are correct. Elegant terns will also eat grunion and Pacific sardine, but they mostly rely on northern anchovy. The breeding season for the elegant tern goes from the beginning of April to around mid-June. During this time, they breed in colonies that are sometimes mixed with Heermann's gulls or other terns. 90% of all elegant terns breed at Isla Rasa in the Gulf of California, but they are also known to breed in the San Diego Bay, Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve, and the Los Angeles Harbor. Their breeding grounds are usually isolated, flat, and have little vegetation with sandy ground, although the Isla Rasa site has a pebbly terrain. When individuals arrive at the breeding site, some are already paired with a mate, while some gather in small flocks called clubs on the outer edge of the main flock. Birds in the club are unpaired birds that are often younger, and they will use the club to socialize and find a mate. Once two birds form a pair, they conduct courtship rituals on land and in the air. The female will grovel as the male presents her with a fish, raises his crest, and droops his wings. The two will then fly together, raising their wings in synchrony as they call to each other. This species is likely monogamous, meaning pairs will mate for life. Elegant terns nest extremely close together, with up to 12 nests per square meter. They use this high nesting density as a defense against predators. The more individuals that are gathered in one place, the less likely it is that they or their offspring will be targeted by a predator. Elegant terns are also more loyal to the flock than they are to their nests, which is known as group adherence. This means that if the birds are disturbed, they will all fly away and sadly abandon their nests. We will talk more about this behavior later in the video. According to the elegant tern, raising chicks is a team effort. Female elegant terns lay 1 to 2 eggs, which are then incubated for 4 weeks. The two parents work together in preparing for and raising their young. Both parents make a scrape on the ground and line it with pebbles and shells to prepare for their chicks, and both take turns incubating and feeding once the eggs have hatched. Chicks stay in the nest for a week after hatching, and they then gather in what is called a creche for about a month. A creche is like a daycare center for the chicks. In a creche, several hundred chicks will gather together while the adults search for food. The adults will take turns guarding the creche by standing at the perimeter of the group and herding the chicks together. Once the parents return, they feed only their own chicks by recognizing them through their unique call notes. After leaving the creche, chicks will follow their parents for 5 to 6 more months. Elegant terns have the most restricted breeding range of all the North American terns. There were previously around 12 breeding grounds, but this number has been reduced to 4 to 5 sites due to human and feral animal disturbance, habitat degradation, and changing climate conditions. Because of this, they are listed as a species of special concern in California, but they are not yet classified as endangered. Elegant terns sure have a lot to do during the breeding season. Now let's see if you remember some of their tasks. True or false, parents take turns guarding and feeding all the chicks that have gathered in a creche. If you answered false, you are correct. Parents take turns guarding all the chicks in a creche, but they only feed their own offspring by listening to the chick's unique call note. In May of 2021, an illegal drone crashed in the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve. Since the elegant tern is more loyal to the flock than the breeding grounds, the entire group of 3,000 birds abandoned the site and their 1,500 nests with it. It is believed that some of the birds relocated to the Los Angeles and the San Diego nesting sites and may have been able to lay eggs again and successfully raise their chicks. However, it is uncertain if the terns will return to Bolsa Chica in future breeding seasons. 0 elegant terns nested in Bolsa Chica for the 2022 breeding season, but this is not necessarily due to the big scare. The number of elegant terns breeding in Bolsa Chica varies greatly each year, as they tend to bounce around California and choose different nesting sites each season. In some years, as few as 1,000 elegant terns nested at Bolsa Chica, and in other years, up to 30,000 terns nested at the site. To help prevent another devastating accident, the reserve aims to increase signage about drone restrictions and is working with the creators of the Before You Fly drone app to update the status of the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve as a no-fly zone. The reserve also partnered with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and other 3 local nonprofits to develop the Reserve Watch program. Volunteers in this program educate visitors about Bolsa Chica's wildlife and monitor and report the plants and animals they see. Unfortunately, elegant terns had more to worry about after the drone crash. Just after the 4th of July in 2021, dozens of tern chicks washed up dead on shore in Long Beach. The chicks were discovered to be part of a colony that was nesting on 2 180-foot-long commercial barges. The barges were being used by the Navy to carry rocks from Catalina Island to the jetty in Long Beach. The long, flat, rock-covered barges appeared to be prime real estate for the elegant terns. Operators tried to prevent the terns from nesting in the barges by moving them around the harbor every 24 hours, but the attraction was too strong. Once the terns began nesting on the barges in late spring, they had to be left alone. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act makes it illegal to kill, possess, sell, or transport any migratory bird or any part, nest, or egg of any such bird. So once an egg was laid, the barge was stuck in place for the entire breeding season. In July, the chicks were almost ready to start flying. To test out their wings, they would jump off the barge and try to climb back on, but the sides were too high and steep. The stranded chicks eventually drowned. When the dead chicks were discovered on shore, the nonprofit organization International Bird Rescue quickly sprung into action. Volunteers scooped chicks from the water and dried them off, then transferred them to the rehabilitation center. They rescued more than 3,000 birds and put leg bands on over 1,000 individuals. Stafford cares for the chicks and tediously hand-fed them slivers of fish until they were old enough to be released at about 35 days old. Some speculate that fireworks for the 4th of July spooked the chicks and caused them to fall overboard, but this is unlikely because the chicks continued jumping overboard for 2 months. It is possible that the birds from the Bolsa Chica nesting site relocated to the barges in Long Beach after being scared off by the drone crash. This would have resulted in overcrowding on the barges and ultimately exacerbated the deaths in Long Beach Harbor. The elegant terns had a rough summer in 2021. What caused them to abandon their nests at Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve? Is it A, the drone crashed on their nest site, B, fireworks scared them away, or C, overcrowding? If you answered A, you are correct. A drone crashed on the elegant tern's nest site and caused the adults to fly away and abandon their eggs. A big issue with the rescue efforts in Long Beach Harbor was that when volunteers in boats approached chicks struggling in the water, the chicks would get spooked and swim into the rocks. At that point, the rescuers were causing more harm than good, so they clearly needed a hands-off approach. The solution was to build small floating rafts and tie them to the sides of the barges. It took $10,000 in materials to build 12 rafts total, each of which could hold 50 to 100 birds. To everyone's excitement, the rafts were extremely successful. When chicks jumped off the barge, they could recover by climbing onto the raft. Rescuers occasionally placed the youngest chicks back onto the barge, but if they were old enough, they could fly back onto the barge themselves. Luckily, adults were not bothered by these miniature islands and still brought food to their chicks, even if they were on a raft. Chicks that frequently jumped off the barge and stranded themselves were deemed troublemakers and were marked with pink dots so the rescuers could keep track of them. Melissa Board from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife saw firsthand the hardships that the elegant terns faced in 2021. As the reserve manager of the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve and as a rescue at Long Beach Harbor, Board wants to do more to help these magnificent birds. Her project for grad school is designing floating nesting islands and determining how to develop and properly manage them. There are lots of disturbances in the city, and it is vital that birds like the elegant tern have options to move to another nesting ground when these disturbances occur. Floating nesting islands about 50 by 70 feet big have been used on the east coast of the U.S. and are a safe place for the birds to go that are free from human disturbances. Board aims for the islands to be small or medium-sized, but if they're successful, she hopes that they can be made larger. As of October 2022, she'll be working on this project for the next year and a half and has partnered with several professors from Oregon State University to bring this project to life. Let's test what you learned about current solutions to help elegant terns and water birds in general. How will floating nesting islands benefit birds? Is it A, birds can fly to them after a disturbance, B, they work as a hands-off approach to bird conservation, or C, both A and B? If you answered C, both A and B, you are correct. It is important for birds to have a backup nesting site, and it is also important that the solution involves as little human interaction as possible. Thank you for joining OC Habitats and learning more about the special coastal bird, the elegant tern. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for more information about our work and how to get involved. If you would like to learn more about California's animals, plants, and habitats, check out the other videos on our website at www.ochabitats.org.